Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you're an observant parent, kind of like I try to be, you've probably had this exact moment. You're watching your teenager sitting right there across the room. They're physically at the kitchen table with you, but man, it feels like they are a million miles away. Well, today, we're stepping directly into their world. We're going to look closely at the invisible struggles of modern youth. Think of this as a journey to understand what's really happening behind the closed doors of our very own homes.
Does anyone actually understand me? Wow, it's such a heavy, echoing thought, isn't it? There are teenagers right now eating dinner with their family, laughing it up with their friends, using their phones just normally. But deep inside, this exact question is just running on a constant loop. They feel completely, utterly, emotionally invisible. And honestly, the absolute most heartbreaking part is that almost nobody even notices.
So the crucial point is this heartbreaking paradox. Sometimes a family provides the physical necessities perfectly, right? Food, a warm house, a great education, but we completely miss the emotional safety. We just forget to pause, step into their world, and genuinely ask, hey, are you mentally okay? And because of that absence of deep, habitual connection, millions of teenagers essentially feel emotionally homeless, despite having literally all their physical needs met right inside their own houses.
Because as parents, we usually expect pain to be loud, right? We look for tears or yelling or anger, but modern loneliness, it doesn't always look like sadness. Most of the time, it just looks like silence, a closed bedroom door, fake smiles when they walk past you in the hallway, dry, one-word replies to our questions, late nights scrolling alone in the dark. These aren't just typical, quirky teenage phases. They are absolutely silent signs of distress. To break this silence, we've got to build simple, daily habits. Maybe it's a tech-free 5 minutes in the car, or simply asking, hey, what was the hardest part of today, instead of the standard, how was school?
Section 1. The invisible pain.
The teenage years are, they're a total whirlwind. Bodies are changing and brain chemistry is completely shifting. See, the teenage amygdala, which is the brain's emotional center, is hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex, the part used for logic, is actually still developing. That makes literally every feeling incredibly heavy. But instead of teaching kids how to navigate this intense biology, society just hands them a rigid script. Boys are constantly told to man up, and girls are told they just have to stay strong. This societal conditioning literally forces teenagers to hide these shifting, overwhelming emotions. They learn to pretend they're entirely okay on the outside while they are slowly breaking on the inside.
Now to the teenagers watching this right now. This is what we as parents truly wish we could say to you. We know that you know this exact moment. It's late at night. Everyone else in the house is asleep. All the noise of the day, the fake smiles, the background music, it all just completely disappears. It's just you and your thoughts. And that is exactly when the loneliness becomes deafeningly loud. You start overthinking everything, don't you? The expectations, the immense pressure, the constant comparisons, and slowly your room transforms into both your absolute comfort zone and your emotional prison.
Section 2. Escaping into the digital maze. Okay, let's dive into this.
This distraction loop is essentially like wandering into a really dark, claustrophobic maze. Because actually expressing real emotions feels way too dangerous or just impossible. Phones become the easiest, most accessible exit route. Scrolling is simply easier than facing reality, right? So the deep conversations stop, and they're replaced by this constant, numbing cycle. Music, short-form reels, games, endless notifications. It's a highly effective mechanism used to avoid sitting alone with those heavy, overwhelming thoughts.
But we have to face a really terrifying truth here. Distractions do not heal loneliness. They only delay it. Sure, this digital maze might temporarily quiet the mind, but it ultimately replaces deep, meaningful connection with superficial avoidance. It leaves that core emptiness inside entirely untouched and completely unresolved.
Section 3. Turning pain into power. Archetypes of resilience.
Consider the massive cultural phenomenon of the anime character Naruto. As a child, he was surrounded by a whole village, but emotionally, he was completely alone. Nobody truly accepted him or understood his pain. So what did he do? He acted loud, funny, and chaotic. As this quote perfectly captures, sometimes the people who smile the most are hiding the deepest loneliness. Behind all of Naruto's loud jokes was just a kid silently begging to be seen. But the truly beautiful part of his story is that he didn't let that isolation destroy him. He harnessed that exact pain and turned it into fire, into strength, and into his ultimate purpose.
We can also find some really profound tools for managing this hidden suffering in ancient philosophy. Gautama Buddha recognized that even when surrounded by total comfort, humans can still feel incredibly empty inside. He realized that our deepest suffering often stems from attachment, specifically our attachment to external validation and the expectations of other people. The reality is, not everyone is going to understand your mind, and you know what? That is perfectly okay. True peace begins the exact moment you practice non-attachment, releasing the need to beg the world to constantly validate your existence. Some battles are entirely silent, and actually, some of your deepest healing happens when you're completely alone.
Let's move to and see how this builds in the real world with a modern icon. Cristiano Ronaldo grew up with unimaginable pressure, financial struggles, harsh criticism, and intense loneliness. At a very young age, he left his home to chase a football dream. I mean, imagine that. A teenager, completely alone, away from family, trying to survive immense pressure. People today see the shining trophies, but they completely miss the lonely nights, the crushing self-doubt, and the profound emotional pain that had to come first. This timeline proves that the strongest people and the absolute greatest human achievements are very often forged right in the crucible of isolation.
Section 4. Awakening to Real Connection.
If you are a teenager watching this right now feeling misunderstood in your own room, I really want you to hear this. You are not weak for feeling lonely. You are human. Maybe nobody clapped for you today. Maybe nobody noticed your anxiety, your overthinking, or your sheer emotional exhaustion. But you survived anyway. Surviving your invisible, unapplauded battles truly matters. I see you, and your strength is incredibly real.
And this brilliantly illustrates the quiet beauty and self-discovery during moments of solitude. Even stars exist completely alone in the vast darkness of the sky, yet they still shine brilliantly. Sometimes the universe isolates people not to punish them, but to transform them. Your loneliness shouldn't become a reason for self-hatred. No, it is a sacred space to understand yourself deeply, to build yourself, to heal yourself, and to truly figure out who you are.
So we arrive at a choice. A final provocative thought to challenge you today. Will you let this loneliness remain a prison, or will you use it as the solid foundation of who you become? The strongest, most resilient souls are so often created in these silent rooms. This lonely chapter of your life might secretly, quietly be building the most powerful future version of you.
If this explainer felt personal to you today, please don't just scroll away. Sit with this feeling for a moment. Maybe for the first time in a long time, you actually felt truly understood. If you have ever felt lonely in your own home, I want you to go down to the comments right now and simply write, "I'm still fighting." Let's build a massive wall of solidarity so that everyone reading those comments realizes they are far, far from alone. And if you're a parent, or if you know someone who might be silently struggling, share this explainer with them. Because sometimes, one single moment of understanding can be the exact spark that keeps a person moving forward. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Keep fighting.
Welcome to today's explainer. Today we're actually looking back. We're diving into a deeply emotional, honestly kind of heavy topic. What really happens when love, ambition, and a whole lot of misunderstanding crash into each other under one roof? We're going to unpack the invisible burden of parental expectations. It's this incredibly heavy weight that so many of us carried as kids, right? And, well, millions are literally still carrying it today. Paint the picture in your mind. It's 2 a.m., a boy is sitting at his study table, his books are wide open, his eyes are completely exhausted, and honestly, his mind just feels broken. Now to his parents, he's just studying hard for a bright future. They're probably so proud. But the hidden truth here? He is sitting there silently wondering if his existence only matters when he gets good grades. He's carrying all these huge dreams that, actually scratch that, they were never even his to begin with. And the really staggering reality, this boy is not alone. No way. This exact scene is playing out in millions of homes every single night. So this brings us to the central, kind of tragic question of our explainer. If parents truly understood their children, would so many teenagers still feel completely lonely inside their own homes? I mean, looking back at our own childhoods, there's this really painful irony. A kid can be totally surrounded by their family, have absolutely everything provided for them, be fiercely protected, and yet still feel completely emotionally homeless. Section 1, the translation error, the silent war of expectations. Let's get into it. In almost every country around the world, there's this silent war happening right now between parents and children. And it's not fought with weapons, obviously. It's fought with expectations. One generation is saying, hey, we sacrificed everything for you, while the other is just silently whispering, then why do I still feel so unseen? So many parents genuinely think pressure creates diamonds, right? They say things like, study harder, or your whole future depends on this. And they're doing it out of a real, genuine fear for their kid's survival in a tough world. But look at how the child actually receives this. The internal reception is completely different. They just hear, I'm not enough, or their love is totally conditional. The home stops being a safe harbor and basically turns into a performance stage. Love suddenly feels tied directly to marks, class ranks, and just absolute obedience. Think about it. A student can score a 95% and still feel literally worthless just because they got compared to the kid next door who scored a 98. It's wild. Moving on to Section 2, Screaming in Silence When Loneliness Wears a Mask. We really need to understand how this deep, totally misunderstood loneliness physically shows up in a teenager's daily behavior. Let me ask you, do you remember the anime Naruto? If you do, you know he was super loud, brash, and always seeking attention. But if you look a little closer, that loudness wasn't because he was just naturally an annoying kid. He became that way because loneliness was literally eating him alive. When kids don't feel emotionally understood, they don't just act out for no reason. They either shut down and become completely silent, or they scream in ways that adults just completely fail to recognize as a desperate cry for emotional shelter. And what's really fascinating and sad here is how modern cries for help get totally missed. Getting randomly angry, feeling completely numb, intense phone addiction, constantly locking the bedroom door, or smiling all day on the outside but crying at night. Adults look at this and just think, oh, teenagers being teenagers. But kids aren't doing these things because they hate their parents. They're doing them because they feel completely adrift emotionally. Just listen to this absolutely heartbreaking realization from a young girl. She said, my parents gave me food, clothes, education, everything. So why do I still feel empty? That just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Having our physical needs met is simply not enough. Human beings don't just survive on food and shelter. We survive on understanding. Which takes us to Section 3, the generational burden, empathy for the parents. Now let's take a step back and look at the timeline of how we got here, because we absolutely cannot paint our parents as the villains in this story. The hardest truth to swallow is that most parents were never emotionally understood themselves. Look at the past. They grew up in absolute survival mode. They were taught that pain makes you stronger, that emotions are a weakness, and you just have to put your head down, work first, and feel later. And because of that, it just becomes tradition. They unknowingly pass down this unhealed pain, not because they're bad people, but because it is literally all they know. And that mindset, it collides directly with the present. The modern generation isn't just looking to survive or make a bunch of money. They're on a desperate search for peace, meaning, deep connection, and mental health. And you know what? Seeking that doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. This entire generational dynamic is summed up beautifully by one really powerful Buddhist proverb. Hurt people create hurt in unconscious ways. Unhealed generational pain unknowingly becomes this incredibly strict family tradition. So many parents are just walking around carrying wounds they never, ever learned how to talk about. All right, Section 4, the cost of perfection, losing the self for success. We all know the modern world is already incredibly overwhelming for young people, right? You've got social media, constant comparison, cutthroat academic competition, just fake perfection everywhere you look. But what happens when that exact same pressure comes from inside the house? Let's actually compare what's happening here. Society demands rigid perfection. Become a doctor, get the highest rank, show absolute obedience. But that violently clashes with a child's deep, innate need for an identity. We're seeing the tragic reality of brilliant artists feeling completely trapped in science classrooms, unique learning styles just being totally ignored, and this massive mental exhaustion from constantly pretending to be perfect. The world loves to celebrate a successful child, but we very rarely stop to ask, what did they have to lose to get there? Did they lose their sleep, their confidence, their actual identity? The author Paulo Coelho wrote something so profound in The Alchemist. He said, when you abandon your personal legend, your soul suffers quietly. And honestly, this is the very core of the invisible burden. So many young people today are suffering in total silence because they're living lives that were chosen for them. Deep down, their souls know they're slowly losing themselves, just trying to become someone acceptable to society. Think about the anime A Silent Voice. The deepest, most crushing pain in that story wasn't actually the bullying. The ultimate tragedy was the sheer exhaustion of feeling completely unheard in your own home while just trying to please the people you love. People can live in the exact same house, eat at the exact same table, and yet emotionally exist in entirely different universes. It's like Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. But realistically, how on earth can a kid control their mind when they are constantly terrified of disappointing the people they love the most? Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Healing Through Listening, Rebuilding the Home. Let's shift gears for a second and imagine a world where parents offered unconditional support instead of fear-based pressure. How do we actually rebuild that emotional connection inside the home? Well, it starts with a few actionable steps. Step 1, listen. Just listen without immediately jumping in to judge or fix it. Step 2, ask them, are you okay? And then actually wait for the answer. Seriously, one genuine conversation can save someone from years of silent suffering. And step 3, explicitly remind them that they don't need to become someone else to deserve your love. Tell them, out loud, that it is perfectly okay to fail. When kids feel understood, they naturally become stronger because they're fueled by support, not fear. And, it doesn't even have to be this big, complicated thing. Sometimes a kid doesn't need another hour-long lecture about their future. They just need one single sentence. I know you're trying. Wow. That simple acknowledgement can instantly heal years of emotional exhaustion. A lot of times, they aren't asking for freedom from their parents. They're just asking for freedom from the pressure. We absolutely have to fix this disconnect because the biggest problem in modern families isn't a lack of love. Not at all. It's a total lack of emotional translation. As we can see, parents genuinely say, I want you to succeed. But what the kids are hearing is, if I fail, I lose your love. That one simple, tragic misunderstanding is quietly breaking hearts all around the world. Looking back on it all, we start to realize that when kids act out, when they're distracted, highly emotional, super quiet, angry, or just seem completely lost, they were never actually trying to be difficult. They were drowning, silently drowning. They were just trying to survive these incredibly heavy expectations while desperately searching for a little bit of acceptance. So that brings us to the end of our explainer today. But before we go, I want to leave this final, somewhat provocative question lingering with you. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone truly, deeply tried to understand that young person in your life? And more importantly, if children felt truly understood at home, how different would this world become? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.